welcome back to another episode of Combat and Cryptids. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, so, yeah, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Combat and Cryptids. That was kind of like, I don't know. I feel like at some point I have to get like some sort of, like intro music to kind of, get the vibes going, get everybody like, it's Friday night like type of vibes. Usually I do it on a Thursday, but today I had to obviously record today because um I was in Cincinnati for this week and I got back Thursday. And if anybody knows about driving, it's usually after you get back from a drive, there's not really much of anything that you want to do. So, which yeah, so I just didn't record yesterday. So it's kind of a day late, but it should still pan out to be the same. So I'm just trying to keep it around, that Thursday, Friday-ish kind of vibes, Like kind of like before the weekend starts and everything like that. You just kind of get the recording done and kind of get it out of the way and just kind of get the things that have been going through your brain for the past couple weeks off your mind. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Mm. So I do want to show you guys this fucking picture. So this thing is creepy as hell. So bear with me. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Boom. So I found this picture from like some creepy motherfucker. From some like creepy ass fucking store. So it's basically like a I don't know, like a weird. They had like fucking like fake mermaids and shit like that that were all like dismembered and stuff. But yeah, I thought I'd show you guys that. I thought it was pretty creepy. But I was like, man, that's so good. That's so cool for like like my kind of weird shit that I'm into, I guess. Well, I guess not weird stuff. It's just different stuff, I guess. And most of the stuff I'm into is not like, it's not like some Jeffrey Dahmer style stuff. It's more just, like things that cannot be explained. Like the paranormal stuff, like that stuff's pretty crazy, but it's just those kind of things. Like I guess like I'm open to the suggestion and I'm open to the thought of these other kinds of things. So whether it be, aliens or Mothman or the Chupacabra or like the Dogman and stuff like those things, like I'm very open to because there's in my opinion, there's been too many reports of these things for them just to like go unnoticed or whatever it is. So it's just like for the most of them, I mean, I haven't seen the majority, minus the Bigfoot whole thing like that, and then we'll get into tonight's episode here in a little bit, which is going to be more. I don't know if you want to call it um, a Dogman encounter. I don't really know. So Dogman usually you kind of associate that with like a werewolf, I guess you could say. But these, or what I saw, and then what kind of my parents saw, and then what my little brother and my dad saw, they were definitely not that style of creature. Like that, like the that underworld type esque vibes. It was more looked like just like big ass wolves. But obviously, if you guys have listened to the other previous episodes, like we're from Okeechobee, Florida, so that's kind of it's unheard of, I guess. There's no known like wolves or anything around there of these sorts. I mean, like coyotes and stuff like that, and like Florida panthers, but nothing like that kind of, that kind of an animal should be there. So that's what tonight's episode is kind of gonna kind of go around. Is that kind of subject? And then I'll kind of tell you my story of what I saw, and then we will also tell you what recently when I was with my dad and my brother, kind of what they saw and everything like that. And then we'll just kind of wrap everything up with um, like my whole thought process on the whole Bigfoot or paranormal or any kind of anything that's unnatural, I guess, more or less, is kind of my thoughts on why I think people see these things and why some people don't see these things, I guess, is kind of the best way to describe it. And that's kind of what I'm basing all of this around. And I'm no expert by any means. Trust me, I'm not. I haven't read up and read all these different Wikipedia sites and all this other stuff. So it's just me just thinking like as I'm working or as I'm laying in bed or playing on my phone or watch TV. It's just little things just like go through my head that kind of it's pique my interest on these stories or different things that I've heard and stuff like that. Like these kind of things just more or less just pique my interest about it, I guess. And it's just kind of something I like talking about and something I like just kind of going over and stuff. Um, so yeah, we'll see how it goes, see how it sounds, and then we can go from there. This one definitely won't be as long as the other one. That other one, last episodes, I was like, damn, this thing is long as hell. And most people probably didn't even listen to it, which hour and a half, that's a lot of time to give up. Unless you ain't working, then I guess you got all the time in the world. But anyway, so we'll and I always keep like little notes, like just so I can kind of keep myself like in check to make sure that I'm talking about everything that I want to talk about on this episode and not bring up other stuff that I want to say for other episodes and stuff. So, yeah. So the big thing. So it was so we're still at the same place in Okeechobee, Florida. It's called the Prairie. And like I've spoken about before, the Prairie is kind of like it's just a lot of woods. That's all that it is. It butts up to a forest preserve, and there's all these different like cattle ranch farms that are around there, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of acres of these things, and they just kind of just all intermingle together. Like you have swampland, and you have like cattle land, and then you have like thick wooded areas where you have like your oak trees, and you in there in the mix of all this stuff, you have like where people feed the cows with hay, and they got feeders for where they put like grain feed in. And then like scattered throughout, you also have like orange trees, like a couple orange trees, a couple grapefruit trees and stuff like that, and all this small game and stuff, like raccoons and rabbits and deer, hogs. I mean, all kinds of different animals are just strewn about through this whole preserve that's out there and throughout the prairie and stuff. So I think it was probably around the end of 2008. No, when did I go to boot camp? 2008. Yeah, it was around the end of boot camp, I guess you could say. So I just got out of boot camp, and I was going to, like you go on like leave after boot camp. You get like a week or 2 weeks or something like that before you go to like, what's called MCT training and all that stuff. And basically that transition period from there is basically your 2 weeks to just kind of, just kind of collect your thoughts and everything, and just kind of see your family and everything because you've been away from them for 3 months and all that stuff. And you kind of just everyone usually just goes back home because you want to see your parents and stuff like that and all that. So I ended up going back home, back up to the prairie where my parents still currently live, and where I go out there, and my dad's always had dogs. All his life he's always had, and I'm not talking like like the normal amount of dogs. Like normal amount of dogs for people usually. I mean, most people, I guess, more normal people, I guess, usually have maybe 2, 3 dogs at most. But my dad, our entire lives growing up, he always had at least 10, 9, 12. Sometimes he had up to like 16 dogs, and they were always specific dogs, and they would and they're not like dogs you find from like a breeder or like a trainer or anything. Like these are just dogs people are giving away. Like somebody had a litter of puppies, and um he's like, hey, you want a puppy? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And most of these dogs are like cur dogs, which basically a cur dog is like a pit bull mixed with something else. So they're kind of all the same looking dogs, I guess you could say. And then he always had pit bulls and stuff, like full blown pit bulls and stuff. And he was just basically those were used for his hunting dogs for hog hunting. And that's how he hunted hogs. He did, bay them up and catch them with the ropes and everything like that. Put them in the truck, that whole spiel. He didn't use guns or anything like that, or knives or nothing like that. Like he used like knives and guns. That's like a last resort. But first resort was trying to catch um, the hogs with dogs. So, but basically he would always walk these dogs and stuff like that. And where he kind of lives at, it's a very, I guess, rural area. So it has like in his front yard, it's all just like a grassy road, and then it always leads off to a shell road, and then the shell road kind of leads back to the main road, which is a hardball pavement road. And all strewn about like all these different acreage and stuff like that. There's always four wheeler trails, because everyone always comes out there on the weekend, and they're always trying to ride four wheelers and stuff like that. The weekend was always, people came out. They would buy like an acre of land, and then you could basically just ride around wherever you want. It's 5 miles by, I want to say, 4 miles is probably a pretty good assessment of it. I don't know how the distance is between each one of the canal roads and stuff like that, but it's pretty big. So basically, there was always all these four wheeler trails that you could either ride your four wheelers down or ride dune buggies down and stuff like that. Well, me just now getting out of boot camp, um, we would always you were always energetic, I guess you could say, and you always wanted to go out, and you always wanted to do PT, and you wanted to run and do all these other things because you just got out of boot camp. So you're probably, well, what you think is like the best shape of your life. You're 18, 19-year-old kid or an adult, I guess, at this point. But you always wanted to, like, after you've done that for 3 months where you just run and PT and all that stuff, it's always just kind of something that you just kind of want to do most of the time. So I get back to my mom and dad's house, and we go out there and stuff, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, we're so happy to see you." The kind of the same way everyone always is, always doing the same thing and stuff. So I get back there, and my dad has all these dogs, and he usually takes them out to walk like every morning and evening. He'll take them out twice a day, because you can't let most of these dogs out because either they fight with each other, or they try and go after the animals and stuff like that, or they're just not. They're not like your typical house dogs that you can just let out and just leave it at that. Um, so at that point in time, so I'm back from boot camp and stuff, and I'm visiting them. I want to go for a run. So I want to go for a run, and usually, maybe at most I'll probably run like 3 miles, and it's obviously 3 miles through the trails and stuff like that. And it's during the week, so there's not really many people out there this time, besides people who just kind of live out there. But you want to you want to basically just go run down the trails. And at that point in time, he had another dog, which from the other episode, his dog, the first dog name was Coper. He had another dog that's name was Coper, which obviously not the same dog because they're like 20 years apart, obviously. But he would just rename the dogs. So he had this dog named Cobra, and I was like, hey, like I'll take Cobra for a run. We'll go for a walk in the woods and stuff like that. And he always had him on a rope, and I'll take him for a run. So I get the dog out, put the rope around him, and then we kind of just take off and go into the woods. And we get probably, I would say, probably about a mile and a half away from the house, and we're just cruising along, just running through the trails, just going at it. It's all sand. It's like hard sand and soft sand, so some points it's a little difficult to run through, but for the majority of it, I mean, you can just run on the side, and it's not that bad. So we get probably about a mile and a half away from the house, and then all of a sudden, at that point, I'm like, all right, halfway point, I'm about to start turning around. So you kind of slow down, and you kind of catch your breath. So I'm trying to slow down at this point, and I catch my breath and stuff. God, I gotta remember to like breathe and slow down when it comes to talking, because it always seems like I just start telling stories and it's like at 800 miles an hour. So my bad if it seems like it's all, fast and not coordinated, I guess, or in order, but it's just kind of the way that I am, I guess. And if you know me, this is kind of how it always is. But anyways, so we get to this halfway point. We're about a mile and a half away, or a mile and a half away. I started to turn around, and I started to slow down and turn back around on this same trail. And for some reason, it's always that same feeling. I mean, if you've been alive long enough, when like something's sketchy or something's off about there's just something weird about the area and stuff like that. And like I did this, like to this day, I still get that same feeling. I got that same feeling when I was about to kill this coyote with a damn crossbow like a month ago. Like that same feeling of something is watching you. Like the hairs on the back of your neck kind of stand up, and you're always just like, oh, what the hell? Like, geez, like there's something's just off about the area. So then we're turning around and we stop. And then out of nowhere, like me and the dogger stop for like not even maybe 2 seconds. About probably, I would say 30, 40 feet in front of me across the like a four-wheeler trail, which is probably about 5 or 6 feet like wide and stuff, like straight in front of me. And I'm shit you not, is the biggest wolf that I've ever seen in my entire life. And not like, not like the size of like a German Shepherd. This thing is probably pushing, like it probably weighs as much as me at the point in time, and I'm probably like 120 pounds, like massive, and it's just like dark as hell, not brown, not light, like a dark, dark black hair, and it's just standing right in the middle of the four wheeler trail, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like, at this point, we're just staring at each other. And then I look down at the dog, Coper, and this dog wants nothing to do with this, like anything to do with this. So at this point, I'm like, no, like this thing's like staring, and it don't even look like it's breathing. Like that's the weird part. Like most animals, like when you see them and they're standing there, most of the time you can see like breath, like as like the rise and fall of the chest, but nothing. This thing is stone cold, no blinking, no nothing, just standing there, just looking at both of us. And I'm thinking at this point, like, unfortunately, dog, like I'm letting this leash go, and we are either both gonna split and part ways, and we might never see each other. But all I'm thinking is at one point, one of us is gonna get away. So I basically look back up at this, what it looks exactly like a wolf, like to the T, like the teeth, the paws, the fluffy tail, like everything that you would think the picture of a wolf would be. That is what I'm staring at. Um, the eyes are like a yellowish, like brown color, and its hair is just long. I'm talking like it's at least 2.5 inches long of just matted, and it looks like it has like briars and like thorns and like little sticks and shit all up in it and stuff. It just looks rank and like ragged, like something that you don't want to just mess around with. So then I I look back down at the dog, and then to kind of see like, hey, what's his perkiness? Because this dog is a catch dog. Like he's made for hunting. This thing is like the attack on like hogs. Like grab the ear and don't let these things go. And as soon as I look back up, this thing on the path gone, completely gone. Like not even like no noise, no sound, no nothing, just completely gone. And as soon as that happens, you can hear off. So the wolf looking thing was pointed like it was running, like it stopped on the path and the head was to the left. So I'm assuming instead of it turning back and going the other way, it went to the left. And then off in the distance, off in the right, probably about, I would say, 80, 90 feet away into the woods, you could hear something else. I never saw what it was, but you could hear something else. And it seemed like whatever, it sounded bigger than that was. And it wasn't like a quiet, like the wolf, I guess to this point is what I'm thinking that it is. It doesn't make any noise. Like it's like, and these are thick bushes and stuff like that. And it just doesn't make any noise. Whatever is off in the distance, though, about 100 feet off into the woods, is breaking everything, making noises, acting like full breaking stuff, just walking like it don't care. And this is broad daylight, which I guess was probably the most weird, odd thing or most concerning thing for me was it's usually most animals and stuff like nothing's really, there's not much movement throughout the day because either number one it's too hot during the day, and number two most of the animals don't come out until like the evening, like dusk time frame. And it was this is broad daylight, which is what completely threw me off for this whole scenario. um and keep in mind, this is after the whole Bigfoot encounter and after all this other stuff. This is all like all these things are just like everything just comes racing back to that same place. Like, it's you're thinking like, what could this be? What is it like? What could it possibly be? And you start playing all these different scenarios in your head, and you start thinking about everything that you've done up to this point. And after everything that you've went through and everything like that, it's just you're back to this same exact spot where why the hell does this happen to me? And I'm like, so this is all just going through my head and stuff like that. This is all after the fact and everything like that. So then basically from there, you can hear whatever it is off in the distance, just basically walking through the woods, like acting a fool. And whatever the the wolf that was on the trail completely gone, not there anymore. And now Coper wants to go the opposite way. So basically, all these roller trails they kind of interlock everywhere. So eventually, they always come back around, or they always go to a road and stuff like that. So you can always kind of get the feel where you are once you come out to a main road. None of them like intertwine, and they're always in the trail. They always usually came out to like either a shell road or a hardball road or a grass road. At some point, they come out to that, because most people like these trails aren't like 5 miles long or anything like that. So eventually, if you keep going in one direction, you're either going to hit fence line or you're going to hit a road at some point. Either way, it's a lot easier to find your way back from that because either fence lines usually lead back to gates, gates lead to roads, stuff like that. So he's basically pulling the opposite direction. So we take off, and I'm talking, that point in time, do you think you're tired? No, when you're scared and that adrenaline's going and stuff like that, you never think anything about you being tired. And trust me, this dog wasn't even stopping. The whole time we were running, he's 3 feet in front of me with that rope, just pulling, going. And whatever it was that was off in the distance making all the noise, you could hear it at some point kind of dwindle off and kind of go away. It wasn't really, it wasn't like it was trailing me parallel or anything like that. It seemed like either it got confused from what it was going after to what we were, because it was just one animal going off into the distance, and now there's two going the complete opposite way. Um, so at some point, you could stop hearing all the rustling and the running and the breaking of trees and all this other kind of stuff, palmetto branches and everything like that. It kind of dissipated, and then we kind of we're running the opposite way of all of this. So we're just going away from it. But at some point, we kind of loop back around. We make a wide loop. So a 3 mile run ended up turning into like a 5.5 mile run. Um, so then we get back and we get to the road, and then you kind of recognize where you are and stuff like that. And you can kind of see and the area, like where certain trees are, where certain spots are, ponds, canals, and everything like that. So you're always so we get back to the point where we kind of know where everything is, and then you kind of like you're not relaxed, but at this point you're very much like, I guess, that comfort, because when you're riding a four wheeler down these trails, it's very quick to get turned to not know certain areas because there's so many of them. So if it's not a trail that you normally go down or a trail that you normally ride on, it's very easy to get like mixed up in where you are and stuff like that. But once you get back to the area where you kind of know everything is, it makes it kind of settles you a little bit. The hairs on the back of your neck and stuff, they kind of just, it's more of just a sigh of relief for you. And then so we get back to, obviously we make it back to the house and everything. Dog is good. We're all tired at this point. Adrenaline, that whole adrenaline dump goes away. Um, so I never bring this up to my dad. I never tell my dad, because I just got. God, I gotta stop drinking those. Oh my god. So I never tell my dad about any of this. I never tell kind of what we saw or what kind of happened with that, or even that happened with the dog, because he would have flipped his shit if he would have found these kind of things out. I guess he says that he wouldn't now, but I know who the hell he was when we were growing up, and he would have kind of just got a little angry because it's like, oh no, that's my dog. You ain't taking my dogs out no more. That kind of stuff. So, so yeah, that kind of happened. I just kind of live with that. And I've told maybe, um, probably a handful. You could probably count them all on one hand for how many people I've actually told this. Because you get to the point where you tell people enough stories and you kind of tell them that, hey, you kind of want to build or talk about a podcast, and they're like, oh, what are you going to talk about? And then you say these kind of things, and people either A, look at you like you're retarded, or B, they look at you like, man, this dude's a little off his rocker and stuff. But I mean, these are kind of things that you just kind of deal with, and you just kind of put in, I guess you put them in the back of your mind, but they never really kind of go anywhere. You always try to. I I've always wanted to record these because at some point I'm gonna start remembering or stop remembering bits and pieces of these stories and stuff. As you get older, you worry about other things and stuff like that. So I always wanted to do this and always wanted to talk about these things. Um, so that whole scenario kind of happened. We grow up, and that was when I was 18. So now obviously I'm 30. I'm still 30. I was 32 when I heard the second story. So, and I'm still 32, obviously, but and there's no correlation. There's no, same time frame. Same. These are all with 10, 12 years apart. So I'm out in, obviously I'm in Ohio, and I'm down in Florida, and I'm visiting my dad, and we get off all on these tangents and stuff like that, and he starts talking. So this is the same time he told me the story of him when he was hog hunting with another dog named Coper, which always makes you think like this dog. I'm never naming a dog Coper because this dog is always seems to be like the name that's drawn to all this. I guess I don't know. Um, so another story that he told me was him and my mom. So my dad they always used to ride around with the dogs out on the prairie. They're both retired. They didn't have nothing to do. Or my dad wasn't retired at the point. I think he was still working nights, but he's off during the day. Sometimes he sleeps and sometimes he gets up a little different. But he was what he told me, and this is all within the past 3 months. This is what I found out, and basically my mom and my dad were driving around on the prairie, and they were on the edge of where the fence line is for the forest preserve, where it butts up to a cattle ranch and then onto the prairie. So it's basically like an L, and one side is forest preserve, next side is this landowners area, I guess, and then on our side is the prairie, which is all the public land and stuff like that. But it's where he always went because there was always cows on that corner, and then that's where all the hogs would always be, and that's where he would always, at probably, I think it's like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. He would always get off of work in the morning. He'd always stay awake for a couple hours, let the dogs out and stuff, and then he'd go take a little ride, and they would just run the dogs and try and see if they could find hogs. So they're in the back corner at this point, and the dogs are in the dog box in the back of the truck, and they turn the corner and they're about to start heading back, and then all of a sudden they said my mom turns around and she looks behind her, and she's like, "What the hell? Like what is that?" And then my dad stops the truck, puts it in neutral. Driving a little Ford Ranger. That's what he always drove. A little two-wheel Ford Ranger, a little white one. And he was like, "What? Like, what do you see? What do you see?" He's thinking like it's a hog, of course. Like, if it was a cow, she wouldn't be, freaking out like that. But he was like, "What? What do you see?" And they stop. She doesn't get out obviously because she's not. She's the type of woman to like think like bad jujubes and bad omens and stuff like that. She's not. She don't want to entertain the fact at all. So then my dad pops open the door, and at this point, I think he had a 22 Magnum with like a 8 to 10 scope on it or something like that. I don't know why he had such a big scope on it, but he did. Or that might not even been the zoom yet. He might have had something else. But he basically looked back, and at that moment in time, there was these two massive wolves, a black one and a gray one, two of them, and they were playing. They were like playing in the road. They had just crossed the road, and they were playing and messing around and playing just like animals would do. And then they said as soon as my dad stopped and put the scope on them, these things split off and didn't make any noise and just gone. And then obviously freaked them out because they were like it wasn't the only thing that are back there are the animals at least that size are um, hogs and cows. That's it. Like you can obviously tell the difference from. I think he said they were probably like 50 yards away from this thing, but obviously you can see. It's daylight at this point. You can see what the hell it is. But it was just so weird that without even telling him the story, the first encounter that I had, without even saying anything, this was already a story that he had already had, but they had never talked about. And I always wondered why they didn't talk about it or why they didn't want to talk about it, because it's it's one of those things. If you're seeing something early in the morning, it's you kind of always push it to something else, like something that makes sense to you. Seeing two massive wolves playing like they're little barn cats is not one thing that would make sense. They do make sense in some aspect, but for the majority of the people, it just doesn't make sense. So then he said as soon as he saw them, they scattered and they left, gone. Didn't hear about them, nothing. You couldn't hear anything running off or anything like that. And I think this happened. I want to think with my little brother. I think he was still at the house, so I don't know. It's somewhere around the same time frame that I saw it, I guess. I don't know if it was, that was in 2008 when I saw it, and it was either in 2006 or in 2010, somewhere in the 2 year time frame, either before or after. At some point where my little brother is still living with them. Um, so so basically from there they ride back to the house, and they tell my little brother, Joey, basically what they saw and stuff like that. And of course, Joey, being the little shit kicker that he is, he was just like, "Hey, well, let's just go." He's like, "I can skip school. We can go take a ride out right there, out right now. It's kind of daylight. We take some guns, take some dogs with us, and we'll go out there and see if we can see any tracks." This is really smart. Like, in the heat of the moment, you're not really thinking about those things. Like you really just kind of want to get out of the area and then kind of go back and see what the heck, like gather your thoughts and then just kind of go back and see what it is. So basically, my little brother, my dad load up the truck. Obviously, my mom stays. She doesn't want anything to do with this anymore, because she was the first one to saw him. And my mom had some stories about some weird owls and stuff like that that were basically like, because she's from Texas, which is she there's some weird shit that goes on there too as well. And she would always talk about, her grandma would always talk about these owls that they basically would they were massive owls, like not these little tiny hoot owls you see in the trees making a little hoo hoo sound. It was more like these things were out to like for like farm animals and stuff. And their talons, when they would crunch them, they would sound like scissors, like sh 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 sh, like that. And she would say some weird ass shit that would go on in text and stuff. But she was on some weird stuff though. But so she wasn't having any part of it, because she's, if it's a horror movie and everybody starts dying, she's like, nah, I'm out. Um, so then basically my little brother and my dad, they drive the truck back there, and they go right back to the same corner, right where they saw him. And they said that you could see tracks. There were definite tracks in the ground, and they weren't dog tracks, they weren't cow tracks, they weren't deer tracks. They look like massive prints, and I'm talking like, how do I do this? Like massive prints, like not the size of like a dog that you would see or anything like that. Like massive ass prints of like two big ass wolves. So then they they basically cross into where the cattle ranch is, and they basically cross, and you see the bunch of cows and stuff like that, and there's like trees and stuff, and there's woods and everything like that. And they said that they get probably about, I would say they're probably like 25-30 feet into the cattle ranch, and then all of a sudden all these cows come sprinting out of the woods, like towards them. And then both of them just look at each other and they're like, well, cows are retarded. So if they're running away from something, it's probably best bet that we run away too. And they said they fucking got out of there. They drove the truck and they never went back to that spot, just specifically for that weird ass reason right there. Because cows ain't dumb. Like if something spooks them or if something scares them, like they're gone. Like they're gone for a reason. They're not running away from. They're not running away from hogs. They're not running away from deer and stuff like that. Like if it's something there in the woods with them that's gonna scare them that bad to make them all run like that. Usually, like unless you spook the shit out of some cows, like people, like that's the only time they'll probably herd up and run. But like to have them do that, that freaked them out enough where they were like, nah, every 15, 20 cows are just taking off and stuff. So then from there, obviously my brother and my dad get out there and they don't go back and stuff. So But these two stories, completely separate. You know, the first story that I told you, like I had told nobody about that up to this point. You know, up to this point, before I had that conversation with my dad, um, and my little brother was there, I was like, man, like, why the fuck? Why won't you guys talk about this or say anything about this? Because I mean, it probably didn't seem relevant at the time. But so both of these stories are completely different time frames. And then obviously I told my dad about the story about when I took Cooper out and everything like that. And obviously he had no idea about it either. And he was like, "There's always some weird stuff going on around there. Like the prairie is already just like if you're from there and you know that area, it's just weird vibes when you go out there. At nighttime, like you think dark, like if you live in like a subdivision or in like houses like apartment buildings and stuff like that, like you think of like in the city like darkness and you turn out all the lights, like that's dark. When you go out to these places like in the country, like into this area, there are like there's a different kind of darkness. And when you don't have a flashlight or if you don't have like street lamps or anything like that, like this kind of darkness is just creepy and stuff. And that whole area on the prairie, like it was all at some point, it had to have been some sort of marshland for like Indian tribes and all this stuff. And the weird thing about it, um, is I was asking my dad about that kind of stuff and like how like the land used to be and stuff like that before all like the housing developments and everything started going. So they're always trying to explore the area. They're always going to, he's always driving around on different trails. And a Ford Ranger, it's a small truck, and they can always get into these weird little small trails that four wheelers can get through. But if you're on a four wheeler, you're just speeding past and you just keep going. Like, but he's always slow coasting, maybe 10, 15 miles an hour, like just slow rolling because he's running the dogs. That's what he does. He would just run the dogs. And he said he would always stumble upon these big mounds. There was always these mounds that were always, they must have been 6, 7 feet tall, and they were all just big. They looked like hills, but it seemed like they were too small to be hills. And then at one point in time, after the years and stuff like that, erosion and rain and wind and stuff, he saw one of them that was exposed on the side, and he thought that they were like burial sites, like some sort of burial sites. And most people think like, oh my God, it's an Indian burial ground and stuff like that. But he actually looked at one of them and saw the bone stuff, and they were actually animal like burial sites, like where like I don't know if the Indians had pets or anything like that, or if they had these kind of I couldn't tell you, but he said they weren't human burial grounds. They were more, and they were all sporadic. They were all spread out in different areas and stuff. But there wasn't like there wasn't 500 burial grounds and stuff like, or burial sites. It was more like he found like two or three in like the span of like 10 years. But it was just weird how there was like you see all these things out there and all this kind of paranormal stuff. And like my dad's always saying like even out at his house, the next neighbor is so far away, like you're screaming, ain't nobody coming. Like that's how far people live away. But they always claim like they always see stuff and like see people or like see shadows and stuff like that. And it's always freaked them out and stuff. But you think like the mind is probably the worst thing for you, because being out there, like your mind is always going to play these weird kind of tricks on you. And they would always claim like they would see like shadows outside the window or shadows in the hallway and stuff. And then when he found those weird like animal burial grounds, like that just freaked it out even more, and it just intensifies everything. Which brings me into the next topic. So basically, like what I think, and I guess my whole theory for all of this is, um, people who see things and people who don't see things. Like there's always two sides of the coin. It's either you see these things and you believe in them, or you don't see these things and you just don't believe in them. Like that's you're one way or the other. And maybe you'll be convinced one way or the other, whether you believe or not believe, until you have solid proof or solid evidence, or see with your own two eyes. Like everybody always has to, like that seeing is believing, and that's a big thing for everyone. Like you always want to, like if you can see it, it's got to be true. Like if you can see it physically, not on the fucking internet, stuff like that. But if you can physically see it, like you would have to think it's true. But when it comes to like why some people see it and why some people don't see it, Is it always just a chance of you're in the right place at the right time, or you in the wrong place at the wrong time kind of thing? But I always thought about these things, and I always wondered, why do certain people see things and see it multiple times and other people don't see it at all and never see it until the day that they die? Um, and my thought process is basically, it's like a character, I guess. If you've ever played like Nintendo 64 and you play like there's always characters you can pick from to fight with and stuff like that. And the Super Smash Brothers was like a fighting game, and you always had these characters that were like blacked out and you couldn't play them until you unlock them. Like that's my thought process and my theory. And this is, this is just me, just wrapping up this session, I guess, before the end of it. But it's just kind of what my thought process is and why I wanted to talk about these things is basically, if you haven't seen one up to this point, or at any point in your life, it's maybe you haven't unlocked that ability to see them. And what I mean by that is everything you go through in your day-to-day life, whether your job sucks, whether your parents suck, whether your life sucks, husband, wife, whatever it is, your kids, whatever it is, there's always some sort of trauma or traumatic event in your life, whether it be when you're 10-year-old kid and your dad drinks a lot and he always just was always working, was never around, like that kind of scenario. You were always pushed to be out in the woods, because you didn't want to be inside. You didn't want to deal with that kind of environment where your mom is just there to cook and clean and take care of the house and stuff like that. So you're always in the woods, and that's kind of how our life was at this point. So I don't know if at that point, and then I don't know if at that point we were kind of searching for something or looking for something to kind of, you know, um, like an escape, I guess you could say, like an escape, like you want to get away from this reality, and because of that, something in your brain unlocks to make you want to see these things. Like, did you see Bigfoot because you wanted something else to believe in or think about besides your own reality that was going on at home? Or did you really see it because it's really just a thing and you were just in the right place at the right time? And if you hear other people's scenarios or other people's conversations about these things, like other people on podcasts talk about how they saw Bigfoot and stuff like that, and then they'll kind of go into like a little backstory or something like that, like maybe a good friend was killed, or one of their parents died young, or they separated, or they were in an abusive family or an abusive relationship. There's something that seems to go on in their life that kind of points them into this direction. Like a lot of people see it on like camping trips while they're in the woods. Well, what are you camping for? Are you trying to escape from, you're trying to get your thought process away from, your reality? Like, is your job that bad that it sucks so much that you want to just have some sort of excitement in your life? Or is these just things that you're in the right place at the right time? And it seems like it happens too sporadically and too often for it to be like, right place at the right time. Like, no, it's probably like, this is just my theory. It's just me shit talking about something that I think, or that I've noticed. I guess not even think. It's something that I've noticed over listening to other people's encounters and listening to other people's stories, that whether they've seen Bigfoot or whether they've seen a Dogman or a Mothman or a any kind of cryptid of any sort. Most people who see these things have been through there's some sort of trauma there. It's not just like normal, like the normal part to that is just, it just seems to, it seems to happen too often for it to just be a normal thing for a day-to-day life, and to not have any hard proof evidence on most of these things is really kind of the kicker for me. So, and what I mean by that is there's nothing to corroborate or to make your story sound likable or true. You're really just going off of what I'm telling you, and that's about it. And then if you know somebody enough, or you hear enough of their story or enough of their life, and you hear what's gone on before up to this point, then it kind of makes more sense, I guess. And when you think of someone's lives and stuff like that, and you think of like their childhood and what they've been going through and what they've went through and stuff like that, you always think back to everything always is going up to a point, and then at some point they see something that they can't explain. And a lot of people have this happen, whether it be they see ghosts or they see one of their grandparents or they see something that they just cannot explain. And most of those people are going through things in their lives, and then at some point it's like just like that kind of like character unlock. You just unlock it, and then I don't know if it's something in your brain that makes you want to see it, because at night a lot of things are harder to not like at night. If you think about a scary clown and you think about it and you think about it, you think about it, at some point you're going to start thinking about a scary clown standing over in the corner and those types of things. Like that's just kind of what your mind does and kind of what it turns into. You start scaring yourself. And if you get to a point in your life where your life is already shitty and you just don't want to deal with it anymore, and you're like, I'll take anything besides this kind of life that I'm going through. And then you get to that point and boom, it hits you. And then you're like, oh shit, like, damn, did I see that? Or did I? And it kind of gives you more of, a different look on like life and reality and kind of all these things and everything like that. So that's just kind of my thought process on it, I guess. So, and that'll be kind of my basis around this whole entire podcast, I guess. And well, we'll go through some other stuff and everything like that, like PTSD and all that other crazy stuff. But everything kind of always seems to be linked to some sort of something to do with your brain at some point. Um, and then, so I remember in the first episode, I was talking to you guys about the whole Bigfoot and everything like that. Like when I was in 2006, I saw it, and then it was on the side of the road and all that stuff. So basically, I got some added stuff to that story to kind of go along with that one and kind of close everything up. So basically, I put that podcast up, and then I shit you not. So I text all my brothers and stuff like that, and I'm like, hey, you guys gotta listen to this podcast. Like, if you ain't got nothing to do, just kind of give it a listen and everything like that. And then my younger brother, not the youngest brother, but the one younger, 1 year younger than me, like we're driving and he calls me like 4 times, and I'm like, what the fuck is he calling for? So I answer him, in that same place we were living out in Fort Drum. So at some point, like during that same time frame, my brother, my mom, and my dad were standing on the back. So we had like a little shed thing where we would skin hogs and stuff. And they were basically looking off into the distance on the edge of the woods. And the dogs are going crazy and all this other kind of shit. And they see this massive, I'm talking massive figure standing right on the edge of the tree line. And it's right next to the big hog pen that we had where we would train hogs and stuff. And this thing, it wasn't a person. And they said when they saw it and the dogs were freaking out and they look at this thing, it's right at dusk too. It's like that perfect lighting to where you can see some people, but you can't like make out like facial features and everything like that. So basically, off in the distance, right on the edge of the tree line, there was this massive, massive Bigfoot looking creature that was standing right on the edge of the tree line, just not even moving, just standing there. And they said it stood there for probably about like 5 or 10 minutes, and then the dogs are freaking, like 10 to 12 dogs are just freaking out back there. And then they're like, "Oh shit! Like what the fuck is that?" So then Dad goes to get the gun and stuff like that to see. He thought it was maybe a person and stuff like that. And then by the time they all got back out to go see what it was already too dark, and whatever it was completely gone. And they told after I told that story that happened in Fort Drum was when he immediately called me and said, "Hey, like this, I remember this happening around the same time in the same area where everything that you said." So yeah, I thought that was pretty crazy. It was pretty insane, but I was like, "Holy shit!" Like fuck. And he was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Yeah, I'll ask Dad and see if he remembers it and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, like I'd love." And then so yeah, that was pretty crazy. I thought like, and it's so weird how I had all these things happen like as I was growing up and stuff like that, and I kind of just kept them all in and didn't really talk about them because I didn't want people to think I was weird or my parents to think anything like I'm doing drugs or anything like that. But then come to find out, like now as you're older and you tell these stories and you kind of go through all these scenarios and everything like that, you find out like other people in the same area have seen the same kind of things, but no one ever wanted to talk about it. And I don't know why, what the big stigma was for no one wanting to talk about it. I don't know if it's because we just didn't want to show those feelings or that side, or was not as, it wasn't as accepted as it is. I mean, it's probably not accepted today, but it's just, it's more easier to talk about it and stuff like that. So that's at least what I think is kind of the big thing for that, is most of the time nobody wanted to talk about it, but then as soon as one person brings it up and says, "Hey, this was kind of going on," then everybody just kind of just goes like, "Oh yeah, by the way this happened, or by the way this happened," and stuff, which is good though, because I like talking about these things, and at some point I'll have my brothers on and we can talk about just random shit that we did as kids and stuff like that, or stupid stuff that we did, and kind of go over those things. But it's just nice to, like, if you want to like rekindle that flame, or like talk to people that you don't really talk to too much, like this is like the perfect subject, because people like to talk about these things, and you get a few drinks into somebody and people loosen up, they talk a lot more, so it ends up being pretty good. So yeah, but we're at about 51 minutes, so I guess we'll probably call that one. We won't make this one as long because the last one was pretty long. So yeah, that was pretty much today's episode. So I would appreciate it if you guys would watch it all the way to the end, and then don't forget to tune in next week where we'll talk about some more combat Afghanistan stuff. So hope to see you guys there, and everyone have a blessed day. I'll see you later.